Welcome to Telesur. This is From the South, from our studios in Caracas, Venezuela. I'm Carla Gonzalez. Let's begin with our stories. Polls have already closed in the United States as the midterm elections have seen a massive voter turnout. These are the first national elections since Donald Trump won the White House in 2016. With these hardline policies and constant attacks on migrants, today the country is more divided than ever. At stake are all 435 seats in the House of Representatives and 35 seats in the Senate, which is made of 100 members. 36 governors' posts are also up for grabs, along with seats in state legislatures across the country. Opinion polls favor Democrats to capture a majority in the House of Representatives, but they suggest Republicans are likely to retain their majority in the Senate. And one of those running for the House of Representatives is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York City. She is seen as a symbol of a new wave of democratic socialists trying to push for progressive government policies.
Well, I am proudly running as a Democrat, and I anticipate and really look forward to collaborating as much as we can as a party in order to make sure that we get a progressive agenda realized.
It's not necessary to have representatives who take money from corporations, but we can have officials who only work for the people in the community.
This election is going to switch the Senate and the House seats. So if we can get a Democratic turnout, then we can help overrule some of the things that Donald Trump says and does.
With all the issues that are happening across the country and the negative energy coming out of Washington and this president, it's great to see someone like Beto, who has great energy, great enthusiasm, positive, great message.
Let's look at the numbers in this key election for Congress, a branch of government with great power in the country. On the Senate, there were 38 seats that went for the Democrats and 49 for Republicans, according to this preliminary data. The House of Representatives, with 123 seats for Democrats and 124 for Republicans. Now let's look at governorships. 13 for Democrats, 14 for Republicans. These are preliminary results, as we told them, as we at Telesur will be waiting for the final results, and we will report them as soon as they come. Now let's move to Mexico. The first migrant caravan has arrived to Mexico City after 18 days of walking.
The caravan left the city of Córdoba in the state of Veracruz towards Mexico City. The migrants started walking at 5 a.m., just like the caravan assembly agreed on. The migrants walked to a highway that crosses 3 states and that heads to the capital. Some boarded some vehicles to move faster.
I am a little tired, but every day we move closer is a day we have to thank God for.
Others walked to avoid the cramped trucks. The caravan traveled 230 kilometers to reach its next destination. Near the toll collection booths, the federal police helped some migrants hop on some cars. Once in Mexico City, they walked to a shelter in the municipality of Iztacalco.
We need water and baby supplies. Also, I would ask people to help with food and milk, especially for the younger ones. We have nothing to take care of babies.
After 18 days, the migrant caravan has traveled for 1,180 kilometers on their way to the border with the United States.
Meanwhile, the over 4,500 Central American migrants have arrived to Mexico City since Sunday. The city's government has set up a temporary shelter at a sports stadium where they have received food, medical attention, and clothes. The group is reportedly considering how long they'll stay in Mexico City before starting to once again walk towards the United States. The closest border crossing from their current location is nearly 800 kilometers away.
We're heading to the U.S. Let's have faith in God that we are able to enter, even if Donald Trump says he won't let us in. Some of us have to get through. We all want the American dream.
Over a period of 5 years, nearly 60,000 unaccompanied minors have migrated in Honduras. According to children's rights organizations, there haven't been policies from the government to safeguard children.
According to statistics, nearly 30% of the people who travel in the migrant caravans headed to the U.S. are children, almost all accompanied by one of their parents. Their testimonies say the state does not offer opportunities.
In our country, there is nothing. We have children, we have a family, we have parents. I come from the island of Roatan. Everything there is expensive. Electricity, rent. We are only working to pay for rent.
According to children rights defenders, migration is an extreme decision, which is usually taken when their life is threatened.
It's not only extreme poverty that is forcing people to leave, it's also violence. But if we had a state that protected people, they would find shelter. The problem is that even before threats, before murders, before extortions, people have no place to go.
Criminalization of young people by the government is added to living in poverty. If you live under poverty line, you are seen as a potential gang member.
For starters, there is political criminalization of the youth. Young people are seen as a problem, not as people who are being excluded and marginalized from the system. Therefore, while there are politics of that nature, then what we're going to have is young people who want to leave the country.
The absence of opportunities for jobs for adults adds greater vulnerability to minors, who are often left to be cared by third parties, without access to basic living conditions.
Many parents are forced to look for jobs in other municipalities or in other countries. So children are growing up vulnerable and facing different types of violence, because not having the right to free education is a form of violence.
From January to June 2018, 124 children were displaced in Honduras due to the threats from gangs in their communities.
We have more stories coming up, but be sure to follow us on Twitter at Telesur English and my account at Carla G. Telesur. We'll be back. Welcome back. Grenada, as well as Antigua and Barbuda, voted in referendums today and decided not to use the Caribbean Court of Justice as their final appeal court, according to preliminary results, with 51.8%. We spoke to an advisory of the CCJ, Ruggles Ferguson, about it.
In Grenada, the results are already out. Have out of the total voters. The no votes have failed. Have 12,100 voters who voted no, and 9,840 No, it does not affect it at all. Yes, that's the final result. Actually succeed to make the PCJ our final appellate court. We require third of those voting, the valid vote cast referendum. So for the bill.
Now to Cuba, where the President Miguel Díaz-Canel is in China to strengthen commercial and technological ties. During his visit to Beijing, he will sign agreements on trade, renewable energy, and in the cooperation of the Belt and Road Initiative. He said this was an opportunity for developing countries. China is the fourth stop on Díaz-Canel's first tour since he became president in April. The former vice president of Ecuador, Jorge Glass, has been transferred to a prison due to his deteriorating health conditions after a hunger strike. His lawyer, Eduardo Franco, said on Twitter that he has been taken by emergency to Quito. Glass was protesting that he was transferred from Quito to a high-security prison in La Tacunga as part of political retaliation from the government. Peru's Congressional Investigating Commission into the car wash corruption scandal has discovered alleged crimes that involve former presidents Pedro Pablo Kuczynski and Ollanta Humala. During the reading of the Commission's final report, Congresswoman Rosa Bartra stated that there is evidence that shows that former President Kuczynski may have been involved in money laundering during his time as finance minister. On the other hand, former President Ollanta Humala is reportedly linked to the illegal transfer of funds from the H2 Olmos company, which is a subsidiary of Odebrecht. After announcing the possible merge of the agriculture and environmental ministries, President-elect of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, has said that his government won't support giving land to indigenous people because that would put landlords at risk.
I have said that if it's up to me, we will not have more demarcations of indigenous lands in Brazil, because we have an indigenous area greater than the southeast region. The landlords cannot wake up and discover that through a decision of the executive, they will lose their own property to a new indigenous land.
France has given refugee status to former Chilean guerrilla member Ricardo Palma Salamanca, even after the Chilean government had asked for his extradition. Salamanca has been a fugitive for over 20 years after being sentenced for the murder of Senator Jaime Guzman.
Friends and family members of Ricardo Palma Salamanca are celebrating. They say that political asylum his wife and children have received will end with 2 decades of persecution and will let them live in peace.
They are grateful that French institutions have listened to them. France is a country where institutional powers are totally transparent and separate.
In his meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron last October, Chilean President Sebastián Piñera asked for the extradition of the former guerrilla member.
We talk about Palma Salamanca. What Chile wants is very simple. We want him back in Chile, where he was judged and sentenced for terrorism.
In April 1991, Ricardo Palma Salamanca, a former member of the Manuel Rodríguez Patriotic Front, killed Senator Jaime Guzman, one of the collaborators in Augusto Pinochet's dictatorship.
Few times people have had access to justice, real justice. Through Ricardo, we can have some dignity, because who Ricardo killed, if Pinochet were Hitler, the man Ricardo killed would be Goebbels. Guzman was the brains behind the massacre of Chilean people. The dictatorship was a two-headed dragon. One civilian head, one military. I lost my parents. Who is to say that Jaime Guzman was not the one who planned my mother's murder?
Palma was sentenced to life imprisonment, but in 1996 he escaped from a high-security prison in a helicopter. Since then, authorities have been trying to bring him back to Chile.
We strongly believe there were violations of due process and of human rights, including torture, during Ricardo Palma Salamanca's trial.
Right-wing and left-wing parties are outraged by Palma's asylum. Many went to the French embassy in Santiago to leave a letter of complaint.
We are asking the French government to revise the situation. We don't know all the French institutions. We understand the institution that approved his asylum has members designated by the French government. So we think it is evident that something can be done.
Despite the fact the French government has made its decision, Chilean lawmakers still hope to see Palma Salamanca extradited.
A new round of layoffs is threatening just under 200 workers at Argentina's Channel 9. During Mauricio Macri's government, unions have denounced cutbacks in television programs, which resulted in more layoffs. President Macri's economic adjustments made during the first years of his government have caused the unemployment rate to jump to 9.6%, the highest in 12 years, according to Macri, which the unions disagree. Argentina has released for the first time a birth certificate without gender identification. The registry office must create a new form, including a line in the place reserved to register gender. People will also be able to ask for an ID without gender specification.
This gives me an internal peace, being able to reach legal statement on how I am and how I perceive myself. This is an achievement and a change in the world. If this can spread through the world and reach people that have never thought that can happen to them, and can be legal in that way.
We'll take one last short break, but stay with us. Thank you for joining us again. The Saudi-led coalition has suffered a setback in its offensive against al-Hudaydah in Yemen. The forces of the Revolutionary Committees carried out attacks with the support of drones and artillery pieces. They partly counterbalanced the advances made by the Saudi coalition. Meanwhile, UNICEF has urged all sides to cease fire near the al-Hudaydah hospital. An address given by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa to Parliament had to be suspended for a few minutes after two opposition members of Parliament exchanged punches. A physical fight broke out between Andries Tlouwam of the Agang Party and the Economic Freedom Fighters MP Nassier Paulsen. This after Paulsen rose on a point of order when Tlouwam was speaking. The two members were removed from the House after this fight. And the South African president has also dismissed insinuations that farm attacks in the country were racially motivated. Responding to a question from an opposition member of parliament, Ramaphosa said farm murders are happening across racial lines and not only affecting one racial group, as claimed by right-wing organizations. In a tweet in August, U.S. President Donald Trump claimed that white farmers in South Africa were victims of racially motivated attacks.
The fact that, yes, white farmers are being killed, including black people on farms are being killed as well, is the reality that we are living with. So the killings of a number of people in our country is something that concerns me. It should concern all of us. And I will never sort of categorize it as just saying white. It is people in our country are getting killed.
Russia and Spain have signed an agreement to reinforce cooperation ties on education and science. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has met his Spanish counterpart, Josep Borrell, to discuss international issues such as the conflicts in Ukraine, the Middle East, and Syria. Lavrov has also met with Spanish King Felipe. In a press conference, Lavrov criticized the U.S. sanctions imposed against Iran.
When it comes to the United States measures addressed to Iran, they are absolutely illegitimate. They are being implemented in flagrant violation by the UN Security Council decisions. The ways in which these measures are announced and implemented can only cause a deep disappointment. We start from the premise that the norms not only of international law but only of international communication remain in force, and in our era it's hardly acceptable to follow a policy based on ultimatum and unilateral demands.
And on another topic, Lavrov has also ruled out any Russian interference in the midterm elections held in the United States on Tuesday.
About the midterm elections that are held today, U.S. officials declared that absence of evidence to show us any interference from Russia on these votes. The election result depends on American voters. We are convinced that domestic disturbances in the United States have a direct impact on Washington-Moscow relations. And our partnership in the global security is so long awaited by many countries that turns out to be hostages to these domestic political disputes in the United States.
More than 17 people died when 3 boats were shipwrecked in the Mediterranean Sea. According to the Spanish Maritime Rescue Services, some 13 people died in the Alborán Sea and 4 others in Caños de Meca, near the Morocco coast. At least 80 people were rescued in the Alborán Sea, while in Caños de Meca only 4 migrants were saved. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has given the go-ahead for lawmakers to advance a bill calling for the death penalty for convicted Palestinians. The controversial bill would allow the Israeli courts to sentence Palestinians charged for terrorist activities to the death penalty. The bill says a simple majority of 2 to 1 judges would be enough to impose it. Hindu devotees have celebrated the annual fire walking festival in Rameswaram, southern India. Devotees walked barefoot across a ceremonial pit of hot coal to receive the blessings of the Hindu god Draupadi. This is celebrated before the Hindu festival of lights, Diwali. This ritual is also celebrated in Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and Singapore. And that brings us to the end of this news brief. But as you know, this and other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. Here you can find, as you can see, the latest information on the U.S. midterm elections, and we have live updates and all the information that you want on the different states that chose today. You can also like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. Until next time, thank you for watching Telesur, connecting the Global South.